Hey, it's Rishi. Welcome to Modern Trinidadian Food. Today, I'm going to share with you the heart and soul of Trinidadian cooking. My grandmother's recipe, authentic Trinidadian green seasoning. The heart and soul of Trinidadian cooking is actually all about this. In Latin America, it's known as culantro, but in Trinidad, it's known as chardonnay or bandania, which actually means wild coriander. Now, the flavor is really similar to cilantro, but it's more pungent. And that one herb is packed with flavor. And one of the main ways that it's used is together with a few other aromatics in what we know as Trinidadian green seasoning. Now, green seasoning is a very popular seasoning or marinade that's used in the Caribbean, and in fact, every island has its own particular twist. Today, I'm going to share with you guys the way that my grandmother taught me. So let's get into it. Green seasoning is a marinade, and it's primarily used to season fish, meat, and some soups. Now, the typical ingredients that you would find in green seasoning would be bandania or shadow benny, parsley, chives or scallions, celery, thyme, lime, garlic, pimento peppers, hot peppers such as Scotch bonnet, and salt. A lot of people would use ginger and onion in their green seasoning mix, but I'd prefer not to use ginger because it's a very strong flavor, so I'd only add ginger when I really want to taste the ginger and have a ginger flavor in my dishes. And onion can ferment and it can cause a dish to go bad. So I'd rather just add the onions while I'm cooking whatever it is that I may be cooking. So there's a bit of a mystery when it comes to the origin of green seasoning. A lot of people think that it may be derived from the Spanish sofrito, but green seasoning is a little bit different. A Spanish sofrito are basically aromatics that are fried in oil. Green seasoning is different in that there's no cooking required. It's really all of the herbs and spices that are muddled together and then stored. And then it's a very easy way for you to take that pre-made seasoning and add it very quickly to whatever it is that you're cooking to add immense flavor. I'd like to think that green seasoning is indigenous to the Caribbean because many of the ingredients used in it are indigenous to the Caribbean. But it does reflect our diverse culture because many of the ingredients can be found in many parts of the world. So I'd like to think that it's a bit of a new world meets old world type of concoction. So let's get going with preparing these ingredients. And just like that, the ingredients are prepared. When my grandmother taught me, she didn't use a recipe or measurements. She used to always say, so much of this, a handful of that. You like how I make it, right? You remember what it tastes like? Well, try to make it taste like that. So it's really important to let flavor be your guide. One important thing to consider is that even with the most precise of measurements, ingredients do change, especially with hot peppers. Sometimes you can get a pepper and it's really hot, so you only need to use a really small quantity. And sometimes it's not that hot. A lot of times my grandmother would say things like, you think it's hot? Oh, it's too hot. Oh, the pepper was really hot this time. Or, oh, it's not hot at all. I used a lot of pepper. Oh, the pepper didn't come out. But that being said, it's really important to have a food scale because sometimes when you use volume measurements like teaspoons and tablespoons, depends on how you chop it, the quantities can change. But grams and milliliters are a lot more accurate. So today with these ingredients, we're going to be making about 150 milliliters or 150 grams of green seasoning. Just a small amount for a couple of meals, so you don't have to have an entire bucket in the fridge. Of course, as well, the recipe does scale up. So if you want to make larger quantities, just scale up the recipe and adjust the ingredients to suit. So let's get going with making green seasoning. So in the old days, they would use a mortar and pestle. My grandmother would have this massive seal and a big stone and she would just be grinding the green seasoning. Today, fortunately, we have a blender. So I've got a really powerful Ninja blender that I'm going to use. But I've chopped up all the ingredients and we're just going to add them to the blender and then blend it. So I'm going to add the pimento, the hot pepper, and the garlic. Now the full recipe is available at www.moderntrinidadianfood.com. The link is in the description box below. Adding the celery, thyme, parsley, bandania, chive, and the lime. And now we blend. So let's just transfer this from the blender. Now I've got a really powerful blender, and it's really important to have the green seasoning nice and thick, a nice thick marinade. So if you don't have such a powerful blender, blend it in small quantities with the lime juice. And if you're really struggling, you can always add a bit more lime juice just to help the blender out. So to this, I'm just going to add a half teaspoon of kosher salt. I'm just going to stir it in. Now I prefer to use kosher salt because I think it tastes better, but if you're using iodized salt, it's important to check the quantity compared to kosher salt, because you might need to use less iodized salt than kosher salt. So there you go, as promised, 150 milliliters of green seasoning. Now this would last about at least 2 weeks in the fridge because it does have lime, but just in general, I would prefer to use it within 2 weeks. Like I said, this is enough for about a couple meals. So I'd rather make it more frequently than to have large quantities sitting in my refrigerator. But it's up to you. So transfer it into a jar. So as I mentioned, taste is really important. So at this point, it'll be a good idea to taste the green seasoning. Now, green seasoning is not something you just have by itself. So the flavors are going to be really strong. But it's just really important to have a taste so you have an idea of how the garlic with the lime and the bandania, the shadow beni, how they all work together, just to associate that flavor, because we are cooking with taste. So let's give it a shot. So as expected, I can taste the heat from the hot peppers. I can taste strong garlic, the lime, and the strong flavor of the bandania. And that's exactly what I want. Also, the salt content is quite good. So there you have it. Authentic Trinidadian green seasoning, just like Grandma used to make. As mentioned before, the full recipe is available at www.moderntrinidadianfood.com. And the link is in the description box below. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.